All right, guys, we're back with another reaction. Napoleonic Wars, Aspern 1809. This is just following the one we did in Spain. That was wild. Uh, Unneeded, really, it seemed like. So we'll see what happens here in this next one. Shout out to Epic History TV, History March, and Osprey Publishing for all the great work they do. Shout out to all you guys in the comments, subscribers, everything like that. I appreciate it. I'm just here to learn, and I'm glad we can all kind of pitch in and teach me some things. I really do appreciate that. All right, let's roll.
In 1809, France, under Napoleon Bonaparte, was the most powerful nation in Europe. But the French Emperor's invasion of Spain and Portugal the previous year had failed to deliver the easy victory he'd expected. And with many of Napoleon's best troops and commanders now tied down in Spain, an old enemy prepared to challenge France once more.
The court of Vienna is behaving very badly and may have cause to repent. All right. So Napoleon's gonna take his wrath out on Austria.
Austria had been preparing for war with France since her last humiliating defeat at Austerlitz in 1805. Now, with Napoleon busy in Spain and a British promise of cash subsidies, plus a supporting attack in Northern Europe, it looked like the ideal time to strike. This time, Austria's armies would be led by Archduke Charles, Emperor Francis's younger brother. At 37, he was 2 years younger than Napoleon, but already had 15 years' experience of high command.
Okay.
And he was learning from past defeats. He'd begun to reform the Austrian army along French lines, copying Napoleon's corps system and introducing new infantry tactics.
Yeah, it worked, man. Napoleonic infantry tactics, okay.
In the Napoleonic Wars, infantry fought in close order, packed together, standing shoulder to shoulder. But why present such an easy target for the enemy? First, command and control. Before radios, orders had to be relayed by shouted commands, drums or bugles.
Wow.
Difficult enough in the smoke and din of battle. Almost impossible if troops were scattered. Second, firepower. Smoothbore muskets were inaccurate beyond about 80 yards, so volley fire, firing en masse, was the best way to inflict physical and psychological damage on the enemy. Third, morale. Soldiers were much more willing to advance into danger or hold the line if they did so together as a unit, urging each other on.
Makes sense.
Fourth, defense against cavalry. Scattered infantry were easy targets for horsemen. Only by sticking together could they fight them off. The basic tactical unit of infantry was the battalion. A French line battalion had, in theory, 840 men, but in practice, nearer 500 to 600. Our example here has 605 men, a typical strength for a battalion on campaign. The men were divided into 6 companies, 4 fusilier companies, and 2 flank companies. On the right, the grenadiers, made up of the tallest, strongest men, often detached to form elite all-grenadier units. And on the left, the voltigeurs, specialist light infantry used for skirmishing in front of the battalion. Skirmishers moved independently, used cover, and fired at will to harass and unsettle the enemy, while preventing enemy skirmishers carrying out the same task. Most armies also had specialist light infantry units for this role, such as the British 95th Rifles, French Chasseurs à Pied, and Austrian and Prussian Jaeger battalions. The traditional battlefield formation was the line. All companies formed up alongside each other, 3 ranks deep. Line formation maximized the number of men who could fire their muskets at the enemy, and limited casualties from artillery fire.
Makes sense so far.
But it was extremely vulnerable to cavalry if it could be outflanked. And even for well-drilled troops, it was difficult to keep the line straight while advancing across broken ground. So for maneuver and attack, battalions usually formed a column of divisions. This was a more flexible formation that allowed the battalion to advance quickly, though it presented a larger target to enemy guns, firing solid round shot that would tear through several ranks, and far fewer men could fire their muskets at the enemy. Theoretically, therefore, the battalion would deploy into line before reaching the enemy. But carrying out this slow maneuver under fire wasn't always possible or sensible.
Right.
So some commanders kept their men in column, relying on momentum to break the enemy line. This was a risky tactic that often worked against raw troops, but led to high casualties when facing better trained infantry, like British redcoats. A column could be closed up quickly to provide protection from cavalry, or if there was time, could form a square. With bayonets fixed, the battalion formed an all-round defence that often resembled more of a rectangle. Enemy cavalry could surround the battalion, but not break in, as horses won't charge a solid wall of men and steel. But an infantry square was extremely vulnerable to artillery fire, and could only move very slowly. Changing quickly and smoothly from one formation to another, especially under fire, required training, practice, and experience.
Yeah,
In 1809, the Austrian army began to use the battalion mass formation, crude but more suited to hastily trained conscripts. This was a dense column with limited firepower and huge vulnerability to enemy cannon. But it could quickly close up to repel cavalry using the same principle as the square, but without the complex drill, and was much more maneuverable.
So, at this time, were the Austrians, so it said using conscripts, was that like Austria's only, like they didn't have any like veterans or like experienced army, where it's all just like kind of like raw recruits or whatever? What was their strength at this moment?
Napoleon, warned by his spies that Austria was preparing for war, left Spain and raced back to Paris, arriving on the 24th of January, 1809. The French army in Germany, commanded by Marshal Berthier, would need urgent reinforcement. So Napoleon summoned units from Spain, called up young conscripts, and soldiers from his German allies in the Confederation of the Rhine. La Grande Armée was no longer the finely honed instrument of 1805, but with Napoleon at its head, it was still a formidable force. Archduke Charles ordered diversionary attacks in Poland and northern Italy, but launched his main attack against France's ally, Bavaria, on the 10th of April. It came a week earlier than Napoleon had expected, and caught the French Emperor by surprise.
That's a little surprising.
Charles was relying on a rapid advance, but a last-minute change of plans, torrential rain, and a slow-moving baggage train slowed progress to a crawl.
There's that weather again.
Marshal Berthier was a brilliant chief of staff to Napoleon, but an indecisive field commander. His forces were too widely dispersed, and Marshal Davout's Third Corps was dangerously isolated at Regensburg. Charles ordered his corps to converge and destroy it. But on the 17th of April, Napoleon arrived at Donauwörth to take over command. He immediately ordered Davout to withdraw from his exposed position. It was too late for him to escape without a fight. Davout's Third Corps was one of the best in the Grande Armée, and in a fast-moving battle across wooded hills, the heroes of Auerstadt threw back the Austrians. Despite the heroism of General Major Liechtenstein, badly wounded, leading his troops forward.
Liechtenstein? That's a very interesting name. I know there's a country or like a micro nation, right, in Europe that's Liechtenstein. Is this where that comes from? Is it like the prince or king or whatever that? Because I think they still have a monarchy to this day. It's like one of the last few monarchies maybe in Europe.
Third Corps escaped the encirclement. The Battle of Teugn-Hausen was the start of Napoleon's so-called four-day campaign. First, he used Marshal Lefebvre's Bavarian 7th Corps and a provisional corps under Marshal Lannes to drive a wedge into the Austrian army. Then he pursued its left wing towards Landshut, believing he was following the main Austrian army.
Huh.
French troops and their German allies stormed the town's bridge to win a hard-fought victory. But Napoleon realized that Archduke Charles was not at Landshut, and that, once again, he'd left Marshal Davout to face the main enemy force. Sending Marshal Bessieres in pursuit of the Austrian left wing, Napoleon swung north, falling on the Austrian 4th Corps at Eckmühl. The French and their German allies won their 4th victory in as many days.
That's good.
But Charles's main force was still intact, and hoping to keep it so, he ordered a rapid retreat across the Danube. The French pursued, storming the walled city of Regensburg, which they knew as Ratisbon, with its vital stone bridge. Napoleon put Marshal Lannes in charge of the assault.
Are these paintings like real? I mean, like they're real, but are they like from that time, or are they like modern day paintings? Because this is amazing. Like it seems like there was a painter just like looking at this happening and then painting it.
When the attack faltered, Lannes threatened to lead the next charge in person, and his men, suitably chastised, took the city.
That's what you want in a leader, though.
During the siege, Napoleon was hit in the foot by a spent bullet, causing widespread alarm.
Really?
But it proved to be a superficial wound. Stubborn Austrian resistance had allowed Archduke Charles and his army to escape across the Danube. Napoleon had cut the Austrian army in half, but both sections now retreated in good order towards Vienna. Napoleon led his forces in pursuit, detaching Lefebvre's Bavarian Corps to deal with a popular revolt in Tyrol, and 3rd Corps and the Württemberg 8th Corps to guard his line of command.
So there was. What's this about? Were they revolting against Napoleon or the Austrians?
Communications. Charles chose not to defend the capital, which surrendered on the 13th of May after a short bombardment. Instead, Charles and the Austrian army lay in wait across the Danube. Napoleon was now down to 80,000 men, facing 110,000 Austrians. Charles's army had fought bravely and well throughout the campaign, but Napoleon still had a low opinion of Austrian troops.
Well, to be fair, they're doing a lot better than what they did in Italy. That's for sure. Now, I don't know if it has anything to do with the Archduke Charles. I'm not sure. Like, was he just really good? And the other guys in Italy were bad? Because in Italy, if you remember those videos, the Austrians didn't look like they didn't know what was going on at all. They just got consumed, basically.
And decided to attack.
What a quote. To cannon, all men are equal. Yeah, pretty much.
On the night of the 20th of May, French engineers hastily built a series of floating bridges between the river islands of the Danube, and French troops began to cross. By noon the next day, Napoleon had most of Massena's 4th Corps and his cavalry across the river, about 24,000 men and 40 guns, holding the villages of Aspern and Essling. Napoleon expected the Austrians to retreat once more, and that he'd only face a rear guard. But reports soon arrived that the entire Austrian army was advancing against him in 5 attack columns, 90,000 men and 300 cannon.
Holy.
The situation got even worse. The Austrians began to float heavy barges and obstacles downriver to smash through the flimsy French bridge.
Okay, Austrians. Looks like we're doing a little work here.
Each time, Napoleon's only supply route was cut off for several hours,
Well, that's annoying.
causing critical delays to the arrival of reinforcements and ammunition.
I have a question. So, at this moment, were the French in control of Vienna? Up here? Because I'm trying to understand why they're building a bridge here. I'm assuming Vienna would have had a bridge across the river? Or maybe it didn't at the time? It was a capital city, so, I mean, I would think it would have that. What was the reason for, like, building all of these, like, pontoon bridges, you know, all these little islands, and going this way, like through this area, instead of going, you know, through like an established route?
The battle began around 2:45 p.m. as infantry of the Austrian First Column attacked Aspern. The village was soon under attack from 3 sides. General Molitor's French garrison clung on desperately, fighting hand-to-hand in the streets and suffering 50% casualties. To support the defenders of Aspern, Napoleon ordered cavalry to charge the Austrian Third Column. But they could not break through the Austrian infantry, closed up in their battalion mass formation.
Okay.
At 6 p.m, Archduke Charles ordered General Bellegarde's Second Column to take Aspern at any cost. Charles himself rode among the front ranks, urging the men forward.
Wow.
In ferocious fighting, the Austrians took the village. Napoleon immediately sent in newly arrived reinforcements to recapture it. About the same time, the Austrian Fourth Column began its attack on the village of Essling, where Marshal Lannes had taken charge of defences while he waited for his own corps to cross the Danube. The first Austrian assault was repulsed. The veteran French cavalry commander General d'Espagne led his cuirassiers in pursuit, but was hit by grape shot and died of his wounds.
Wow.
Around 9 p.m, the Austrian Fifth Column finally arrived in position and made its first attack against Essling, which was thrown back by Lannes' troops. As night fell, firing died out across the battlefield, and men got what rest they could among the dead and the wounded.
Let's see what Napoleon can do.
Overnight, Second Corps and the Imperial Guard crossed the Danube to reinforce Napoleon's army, which now numbered 71,000 and 150 guns. But then the bridge broke again, leaving Davout's Third Corps still waiting to cross.
That sucks.
Nevertheless, Napoleon decided to attack, using Second Corps to break the Austrian centre. But first, Aspern would have to be retaken. Heavy fighting broke out in the village before dawn. By 7 a.m, it was back in French hands. At Essling, fresh Austrian attacks were fought off by General Lassalle's cavalry and units of the Young Guard. With both flanks secure, Napoleon launched his main attack in the centre with Lannes' Second Corps. Austrian guns poured fire into the advancing French ranks. General Saint-Hilaire, leading the attack, a hero of Austerlitz and Jena, had his foot blown off, a wound that proved fatal.
That's crazy, man.
Archduke Charles sent his grenadier reserve forward to strengthen the line. The French infantry, under torrential fire, began to fall back. At this critical moment, the French bridge over the Danube was broken again,
Wow.
halting the vital flow of reinforcements and ammunition to
That's really
Napoleon's army.
unfortunate.
By 2 p.m., the French had been driven out of Aspern once more. Heavy fighting continued in Essling, which was briefly captured by the Austrians, then retaken by the Young Guard. Napoleon knew his army could do no more.
So during these fights, the people of these are these people evacuated, like the civilians, or are they just kind of hunker down and wait for the fighting to stop? Because like obviously this is not a walled city, so there's like no defense, unless the people are just told to leave.
At 4 p.m., he ordered his exhausted cavalry to make a last charge to keep the enemy at bay, then gave the order to retreat. Archduke Charles, whose own army had suffered huge losses and was low on ammunition, was content to watch the French withdraw to the island of Lobau. In the final moments of the battle, Marshal Lannes, one of Napoleon's finest commanders and closest friends, was hit by a cannonball that smashed both his legs.
What? No.
He died of his wounds a week later. It was a deep blow to the Emperor.
What a loss for France and for me. Dang it. I hate when the marshals get hurt and killed. For some reason, they any of the marshals, they just make me, I don't know, like I'm so interested in them. Like I'm almost more interested in them than Napoleon. You know what I mean? Like they seem very smart. All these videos we've watched so far, in Egypt and Italy, they all seem like they're, I don't know, they're just cool. That sucks.
The two-day Battle of Aspern-Essling was Napoleon's first major defeat, caused by his overconfidence and hasty planning. Both sides suffered heavy losses, and Napoleon avoided a much greater disaster only because of the exhaustion of the Austrian army.
Wow.
The French Emperor had learned new respect for the Austrians. Under Archduke Charles, they had fought bravely, with greater confidence, organization, and leadership. Within days of his defeat, Napoleon had summoned reinforcements to join him on the Danube and begun planning his revenge. If you'd like to learn more about Napoleon's major battles or campaigns, our sponsor, Osprey.
What a video, man. That sucks that right at the end, freaking Lannes get hit by a cannonball. I hate that, dude. That just annoys me. Like, the battle was already over, basically. It's not even like he got to die like a heroic death. He's just like standing there, all of a sudden a cannonball hits you in the feet or in the knee or whatever. Well, anyway, this was a defeat for Napoleon. I mean, it was a defeat, but it didn't seem like it was that, like, it's not like a big crushing defeat, really. It was just more of like a crappy situation because all of his bridges kept getting, broken up, which obviously big props to the Austrians. They fought better. It seems like Archduke Charles is at least, a somewhat competent leader. And they were floating things down the river to break the bridges, but it's like, it had Napoleon had that not happened, I'm sure. Well, I guess I don't know, but I would assume it would have turned out a lot different. But that's just how it goes, man. Like I said, the weather, just random things that happen, just totally change the outcomes of battles. A marshal gets hit in the freaking legs, just gets killed or dies a few days later. What they said. It's like you can't really account for that stuff. It's just random stuff that happens, and then you just deal with it moving forward. I mean, even Napoleon got shot, or well, had a superficial wound. That could have been something more serious, and maybe he would have died of his wounds. There's just things happen, and you just got to move on. But that sucks that Lannes died. I hate that, but it looks like he's gonna be avenged, apparently, according to the next video. So, we'll see you in the next one. Appreciate you guys. Leave a comment. If you subscribe, great. Thank you. I always appreciate any of that support. Coming up, my not tomorrow, but coming up, my uploads might be a little sporadic. I've been having dental issues, so I'm trying to get scheduled for like an exam to see if I need like some root canals and some crowns and all that fun stuff. I don't know if you guys have had dental issues. It sucks. Like my teeth right now are in so much pain. Nothing helps, but um, this was good. Yeah, I mean, kind of a shorter video, but we'll see what happens and we'll go on to the next one. Peace. Thank you guys.